other sites, and it may affect your repeat business with the CRO or the sponsor if you fail to achieve your recruitment goals. So we want to provide you with some tools to help boost your site's patient recruitment. And one way, after your database is exhausted and you have limited or no advertising dollars, is to elicit patient referrals. I'd like to review some of the strategies for outreach. So hopefully you've had some thoughts about this prior to accepting this study at your site. But you need to think about the patient pathway. How are these patients going to get enrolled into this study? For some sites, perhaps you have all the patients in the database. For other studies like acute care or inpatient studies, these patients may automatically present to you when they have an illness or an acute condition. But in most cases, it's a combination of efforts, and these circles may be weighted differently depending on the study indication. But most enrolled patients are going to come from a combination of your database, internal referrals, external referrals, and maybe even some advertising. And for best success, it's important that these efforts are done simultaneously. For example, you don't want to wait till your database is totally exhausted before you begin to elicit referrals. So raising community awareness. I'd like to touch on the importance of raising community awareness, and then we'll get into the specifics on how to do this. Raising community awareness is often huge overlooked process, and it's more than just placing an ad somewhere and hoping your patients will see it. As you can see here, I've outlined it as a process. So first, optimizing your site, of course, is most important. Then optimizing that referral network, and ultimately raising that community awareness about your trial. Effective sites really engage their surrounding communities. Creating a patient-centric environment at your site will keep the patients coming back and keep those referrals coming in. I really encourage you to get involved with your community as much as possible, and we'll go into more detail on how to do this in a bit. These are just some suggestions. So support groups, community clinics, local pharmacies are all great resources for your site. I also encourage you to really canvass your community to find out what's going on around your site. Refer your patients to events that may benefit them. And always track your efforts. You'll hear me repeat this many times, but tracking is so important for your success in building these referral networks. You obviously, once you get permission, want to distribute and display your study materials, and remember to always remove them once the study enrollment has ended. You want to be conscientious and grateful for any help that you receive. So I'm going to start by talking about important planning stages for the strategy to be most effective, and that is in building your list of potential referrals. List building is like a map, and I suggest building this in a spreadsheet that can also be used for those tracking purposes. By doing this, you're going to be able to compile invaluable information and know what worked and what didn't work for your site. And I've learned that these strategies are very site specific. I'm going to provide you with many suggestions today, and some that have worked great at some sites and not so well at others. But you always want to let the sponsors and the CROs know that you've left no stone unturned when it comes to your recruitment efforts, and that's what will keep those studies coming back to you. So let's start with community events. I touched a bit on the importance of community involvement, and here's some more specific ways you can reach out to your community. Search for local events and health fairs that may align with the population you're looking for. And social media can be a very valuable tool for event searches. Look for ways you can sponsor a booth at health fairs or school fairs, or you may even consider co-sponsoring with a partner business, such as like an urgent care center or a dental office or an eye doctor's office, something that aligns with your study goals. Gather all the potential resources in your spreadsheet. Even though you may not use them at this time, it's going to save you time in the future. Once you have some relationships established, you'll find your referral numbers will continue to grow. The next slide is from TrialJoin.
So here's an easy way to keep track of all the events and health fairs that might be going on in your area. The first tool that we want to recommend is Google Alerts. So you can set up Google Alerts for various keywords, various things. So as you can tell, I set up alerts for the presenters of this presentation, along with the companies that they work with and the cities that I'm in. So, for example, one I like to point out is Orange County health events. So this way, it points out any health events going around Orange County, California. The next way is using Facebook and searching health fairs, health events, or different events, and Facebook will show you what's going on around your area. So that way you can network with the people presenting it and hopefully get a booth there or figure out some type of way of collaborating with them. So these are some helpful tools. Hopefully, if you have any questions about them, let us know and we'll help you out.
Great. So I'm going to continue with building lists and talk about advocacy groups. So establishing partnerships with advocacy groups can really be beneficial for your site. For example, you may look at the American Diabetes Association website to find study participants for a type 2 diabetes trial. I encourage you to contact the local chapters near your site. The smaller groups are better able to provide direct interactions and at low cost or possibly free. When possible, try to make it a win-win situation. Again, you're going to hear me say this a lot of times, but it's a strategy for success in this area. Volunteer to assist at these events, or at minimum, attend the events and network with other vendors and potential study participants, or even their caregivers. When I was at the site, we were enrolling for a chronic kidney disease study, and we didn't have the resources to sponsor a booth. So we volunteered at the National Kidney Association event near our site. We had the role of signing in all the attendees, which gave us the opportunity to interact with everyone that walked in the door. We were able to identify 3 patients from this one event in a study that struggled to enroll for months. So that's just an example of how you might get out in your community and partner with those advocacy groups. Be sure to, again, use your social media, as Ari said, and join and follow online advocacy or support network groups, and be sure you receive those notifications of any event that may benefit your studies. And then we're going to talk about pharmacy outreach. This is something I never really used when I was at the site, but it's been a great strategy for several sites that we've worked with here at the CRO. This is a great website to easily locate pharmacies near your site. So just by plugging in your zip code, you can identify all the local pharmacies in a given radius and put them right into your spreadsheet list. And I've just outlined some of the best practices for once you get to the implementation stages for pharmacy referrals. So for better results, target the smaller pharmacies, not the large retail chains. Set up a time to meet with them and briefly discuss the partnership with your site. If the pharmacy is concerned that they're going to lose their patient's business, please reassure the pharmacist that you're not trying to take patients away from them. And again, try to implement that win-win situation. Just reinforce that with the pharmacist that your patients will just be in the study for a short period of time, and they will return to them for care. Be sure to provide concise materials or postcards to contact the site. As with any referral source, it's really important to minimize what they need to do. I have an example of a pharmacist flyer to show you a bit later. We've had sites that have had great success with this strategy and continue to go back to their pharmacist whenever they have a study that may benefit from this type of referral. We had one site that simply provided a stack of their recruitment contact cards. They were looking for patients for a specific lipid trial on specific lipid-lowering medications, and the local pharmacist was more than happy to provide the card as a resource for the patients to explore other study participation. Okay, and then physician outreach. So getting other physicians to refer patients is an area that's always brought up as an impossible feat. But I encourage you to include them in your list building. Sometimes the approach can make a difference for eliciting referrals from other healthcare providers. So offering payment for referrals is not generally allowed. However, you can offer to reimburse for work that is done. For example, data mining fees or administrative fees, or perhaps offer them to work as a sub-investigator if that's a possibility. For both physicians and pharmacies, again, I'm going to say the win-win situation. Encourage them that they're not going to lose their patient, and you really want to work with them in caring for the patients. Refer patients back when and if that's ever possible, and be sure to follow up with those referring physicians if they do give you patients, to keep them really involved in that patient care and progress throughout the way. And here's another slide from Trial Join.
So as you're communicating with all the pharmacies and all the physicians out there, you generally want to use a tool to help you centralize and aggregate all your communications. And so what we recommend is a class of tools called a CRM, which stands for Customer Relationship Management. So this allows you to track all your emails, all your notes in one centralized area so your whole team can coordinate on efforts to reach out to physicians and pharmacists. Some of the tools that we like to recommend are Base CRM, Close.io, or Insightly. There's quite a few other ones such as Salesforce, which is the larger known one, and there's Siebel, Sugar CRM, Zoho, Microsoft Dynamics. And we encourage you to check out all of them and see what fits your unique needs and what's going to be within your budget, because every one of them has a different price point and a different list of features. So definitely check them all out, and if you have any questions, again, feel free to ask us.
Great. And then finally, of course, that always forgotten, think outside the box for other potential places that you may find patients for your study. Consider places in your community that you can post flyers and continue to raise that community awareness about your trials. This is not an all-inclusive list. These are just some of the suggestions that I used at the site and that some of our sites have had great success with from the CRO standpoint. So grocery stores, gyms, churches, laundromats, apartment complexes, restaurants, and colleges and universities can always be great places. Another strategy is to sponsor your own health fair or open house event to raise community awareness, not only about your studies, but about your site. So we had used this when I was at the site and had great success. We were recruiting for a pediatric vaccination trial. We needed 200 kids in a short amount of time. And we chose to sponsor or have our own kids' health fair. It turned out to be a great strategy. It also, we used the opportunity to raise the awareness of vaccines in general and getting your children vaccinated. And we were able to enroll the trial in less than the designated enrollment period. So that was great. So while you're building your list, it's really important you have the right materials ready to go before you begin to make your contacts. Sometimes these are provided, and other times it's left to the site to create their own. So first, to create recruitment materials if they're not provided. And here it says recruitment materials, it's all about the messaging. At minimum, I recommend you create a flyer that can be printed or posted or even emailed electronically to your patient's database. You want to attract the right patient with the right messaging. And I will admit, sometimes sponsors don't meet the mark, but if you feel that the materials will not attract the right type of participants, please let the CRO or the sponsor know and take the liberty to create or improve those materials. It's important for you to remember you're the site experts. In your creation of materials, be sure to address any potential questions from the patients. And of course, be sure all patient-facing items are IRB approved before you use them. And then material development may not only be for patients, but you can also create some things for healthcare providers that you're asking to refer you patients. If you're creating, be sure the materials are concise and eye-catching. Ensure they raise awareness and prompt discussion between the patients and their healthcare providers. You want them to present a clear and compelling rationale for the study that are easily understood by the patient. They should help patients understand what's required of them to participate. And of course, you don't want to forget to describe the steps needed to refer a patient to your site. This can be as simple, again, as providing a stack of your business cards with your patient recruitment phone number for a doctor or pharmacist or whoever to hand the interested patient. So here are just some examples of patient flyers from Trial Join.
So I'm sure everyone has developed a print ad in the past, but there's a few things that we like to point out as best practices as you are designing them. You definitely want a prominent image to capture everyone's attention, and then you want to list out the condition centrally. And then you want 3 important segments. You want to list out the IE criteria, the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and really simplify it and minimize it as much as you can, so that way you can get a broader reach and hopefully build your database as well. And then secondly, you want to list out the reasons why they should participate in a clinical trial. State, it's going to be a reason that they want to play an active role in their health. They want to learn more about their condition, and they want to advance medical knowledge. Then the third thing you want to do is give them a list of what they can expect by joining the clinical trial. What compensations they're going to receive, what they're going to get from the study, that you'll provide travel, stuff like that, so that way they can rest more assured of things that they'll get out of the trial. And here are 2 examples of flyers we made, and so if you ever need any samples, please feel free to reach out to us.
Okay, great. So beyond study flyers, there's other site tools that can be helpful in building your referral network. Again, as you know, doctors are very busy and need concise, easy-to-use tools that keep the study or your site on top of their mind. So a healthcare provider-facing flyer or an abbreviated study summary sheet, as well as pocket key entry criteria cards can be great tools. Also, here at MedPace, we're getting more automated, and we're creating a site-facing app that will be used to help sites have quick access to patient recruitment tools right on their phone or tablet and be able to receive referrals electronically, physician to physician. So we're really excited about this. Creating short PowerPoint presentations can also be great for lunch and learns and grand round type sessions, as well as for internal staff training. I've also seen these used successfully for more complicated studies to explain more visually to potential patients. This is an example of a site tool that can be used to elicit referrals. We call it a pre-screening checklist. As you can see, it's not an overwhelming list of the full entry criteria, but highlights just the key entry criteria that may indicate a potential patient might be eligible. Remember to optimize your internal referral sources. This sounds like an obvious resource, but oftentimes internal referrals are overlooked. You want to be sure that all of your staff are well informed of all of your studies, and providing something simplified, such as that pre-screening checklist, can be a helpful tool for your staff. In large institutions or sites with multiple locations, be sure to contact other departments and make sure they're aware of the type of patients you're seeking. Be sure to also check back frequently with them, again, to keep it on top of their mind. Providing a flyer or other site tool is also helpful in this strategy. And posting flyers in your building or other department areas that's allowed is also a great strategy to keep that study in your site on top of everyone's mind. So this is an example of a pharmacy flyer that I was talking about before. Patients in this study were in the hospital and they had to be taking a certain medication to be eligible. This was a great way to identify potential patients using the pharmacy as a referral source. It's very simple and was right in front of the pharmacist's face. So if they were filling a prescription for Foscarnet, they were immediately contacting the study team, so that patient had the option to participate in the study. And it turned out to be a very effective strategy as well. So as you speak with your sub-Is and other department physicians, discuss with them their willingness to meet with other colleagues that they may have to talk about referring patients. Talk about what the barriers may be to referring patients and think about potential solutions. And if possible, participate in those grand round sessions to present the study and request referrals from a larger audience. Maximizing external referrals. So now it's time to use the list that you built. You want to start contacting all the resources on your list to request the possibility of posting study flyers or leaving study information or contact cards with that referral source. Again, tracking is important to maintain responses for future studies. And this is a big feat once you've got your list built. So you may want to utilize your support staff, business development, or anyone who may be able to assist with this effectively. You want to be sure to provide follow-up on all referrals from healthcare providers with even a simple thank you, and also be sure to provide prompt reimbursements if any agreements were made for administration fees. And here are just some of the best practices for the sites that have had the most success with physician outreach. So you want to make sure you're contacting an office manager and scheduling a visit. Don't just show up unannounced. You want to try, when at all possible, to use the PI or the sub-I to meet with the physician or the office staff. And at the meeting, provide a brief presentation, not too in-depth, but use that PowerPoint, to explain the study. Bring your recruitment tools to simplify their efforts, the ones that we discussed previously. And then also don't forget an action card for them to be able to refer patients to your site. Of course, lunch and goodies is always helpful too, but be sure to ask when you're scheduling your visit if this is okay, because some offices don't allow it. Once that referral is established, be sure to follow up regularly and keep them in the loop. Let them know what you have in the pipeline. And that way you'll keep that contact fresh. So this is an example of a study fact sheet for healthcare providers. This is something that we've used successfully at the site and at the CRO. It is actually just just to show you, it's one page, very concise, just the key entry criteria, and of course include where to find out more and that action for how to contact your site or how to refer a patient. So in summary, just wanted you to remember patient recruitment is the #1 challenge, and I encourage you to strive to do everything possible to enroll the subjects that you promised. Build those referral networks. Think about that patient pathway. Think about how ways you can raise the community awareness and get involved in your community around your site. Maximize those internal referrals. Be sure everyone internally is aware of your study and the patients that you need. Build your external referral source, and most importantly, track, and follow up on all those referral sources. So with that, I wish you all the best of luck in building these referral networks for your sites. And again, if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box. We'll have a Q&A session later. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter.
Theo, I assume you can all hear me. Just tell me if you're not getting reception there. Are we good?
I think we hear you now.
Okay, good. So I'm Theo Bransdorf. I'm a physician who's a career pharmaceutical consultant. And I'm going to give you an overview of what it takes to be a highly effective site based on my experience now for the past 7 years. Next slide. So just to give you some idea of what I've worked on in the past 7 years, all the way from respiratory, cardiovascular, oncology, infectious disease, liver disease, end-stage renal disease, and now inflammatory bowel disease. What I'm going to discuss today pretty much covers any therapeutic area you're thinking about. Pretty much there are some basic principles, and that's what I'm going to focus on. Next slide. So let me just give you an idea of how I go about working on a rescue trial. And I say rescue trial, sponsors come to me with a trial that is just way behind where it should be in terms of performance. And here's how I go about it. I visit the sites regularly. Of course, it's a lot of travel, both domestic and international. And the way I do it is I always start with the best performers. I go to the sites that are doing really well for two reasons. Number one, obviously to learn what they're doing, trying to develop best practices. And number two, motivation and thank you. I always say one has to express appreciation, especially where trials are competitive. If you don't show the love, sites may go and work on competing trials. Once I've done that, I go visit the non-performers, those that are not performing at all. And I try, time permitting, to also go to moderate performers to see if we can do even better. The thing that I've learned is best practices can come from everybody, non-performers, high performers. There's some really great ideas, and that's the focus of what I'm doing as I go visit sites. I sit down with them and in a totally collaborative way, try to investigate how we can come up with new ideas. There are only two ways, essentially, that any trial can find patients, and that's either within the practice already, and then secondly, trying to capture patients from outside the practice, which is what Betsy, of course, focused on a lot today. And as we're going along, I'm trying to push the sites to think outside the standard, outside the norm, as we say, thinking outside the box, coming up with innovative ideas. And I always encourage them to send me ideas that they come up with that are sort of unusual. And in many cases, we'll support that with dollars, meaning the sponsor will see the site as a laboratory where we can experiment and try new things and see what might work. And if that's a good idea that works, spread the idea across many of our other sites. Just give an example. I had a site in Chattanooga not so long ago. In Chattanooga, there's a monthly glossy magazine focused exclusively on health, and they wanted to put an advertisement in the magazine. I think for 6 months it was about $10,000, and right now we're in that process to see if this really works. Now, oftentimes I do get help from a broader team, either medical science liaisons. It might be, of course, the clinical monitors that are helping me. We had one study that was including Europe, where we had what was called clinical enrollment managers, one for each country, that spoke the language and, of course, was in the same time zone. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is to come down to best practices, which is what I'm going to discuss later on in my presentation. Next slide. So this is the slide that I think astonishes the sites that I work with when I show them what is a patient worth to a sponsor. If every patient we could put a dollar value, here's what it is. It's worth probably $1 million, which probably blows you away. How do I come up with $1 million? Here's how I do that. First thing to bear in mind is when a new molecule is discovered by a pharmaceutical company, a patent will be filed, a patent request. Once approved, it's given a certain date when it'll expire and generics can come into the market. That date for patent expiration is not going to change. So the key thing is that the earlier we can finish the clinical trials, the more time there is to market the drug and bring in revenue. So on average, a new drug launched in the first year will earn about $365 million. Now, obviously, there might be outliers. There are some that are $1 billion blockbuster in the first year. There are some drugs that are perhaps just $50 million. It might be a new antibiotic that's last resort, so used only when everything else doesn't work. That might be a $50 million product. But on average, a new drug will be $365 million revenue in the first year, which means that every additional day we can market the drug is worth $1 million to a pharmaceutical company. The other thing to bear in mind is using as an example a phase 3 final protocol, right, that will hopefully get the registration going. We allocate usually the same number of days for the number of patients we need. So if we need 400 patients in a trial, we'll give 400 days to enroll that trial. So pretty much one subject per day. Every day we can advance completing the study will be worth $1 million. So when we're spending $10,000 or $20,000 on a certain idea, If that's going to be successful and get us one patient or two patients or three patients, we're talking about serious millions of dollars there. Very high return on investment. Now, the other thing that's changed my thinking about enrollment is the following: technology. When I first started doing this 7 years ago, social media were hardly the entity that they are today. Facebook wasn't the powerful force that it is today. And I'm just going to give you an example of how technology has changed the whole landscape of enrollment. My wife has end-stage kidney disease from kidney stones, first discovered about 15 years ago. She had a massive kidney load. Initially, they debulked her and got rid of all the stones, and all the stones were back probably within a year and a half. So now they don't even try to remove them. But from the kidney stones that she has, probably with residual infection happening, her creatinine clearance, which is normally about 100 plus, is about 32. So she's possibly headed towards a transplant. Thank goodness stable at the moment. But about a year and a half ago, she developed weakness, probably associated with the kidney having an enzyme called erythropoietin, for those of you who know physiology. With erythropoietin not functioning normally, she may have some weakness from oxygen not being delivered normally to her tissues. So my wife, about 2 months ago, must have done a web search at Google, end-stage kidney disease and weakness. Now, you know what happens, right, when you do a web search. You see an advertisement. If you Google right now, Hotel Bermuda, you'll see an advertisement probably an hour or two later. Do you need a hotel in Bermuda? How does they know that? Of course, it's something related to cookies. Anyhow, so my wife sees an advertisement on her Facebook page. Do you have end-stage kidney disease and weakness? She clicks through the ad and comes to a landing page which asks her 3 questions. Number 1, how severe is your weakness from 1 to 10, 10 being the most severe? Question number 2, what is your creatinine clearance if you know it? Versus 32, she puts that in. Question number 3, would you be open to being in a clinical trial? She submitted that information. Next day, she got a call from a site in Los Angeles where we live. You passed the pre-screen, come on in, we want to screen you for a trial. So here's what happened, right? In the middle of the night, no human being involved, a potential patient was identified for a clinical trial. Therein is the power of technology and social media today. Next slide. So I'm quite sure this is all familiar to you. Why does enrollment lag at a site? The first thing, of course, is protocols are too restrictive. The very first trial that I worked on trying to boost enrollment, I was brought in to focus on the protocol as the starting point. There was a lot of feedback from the site saying that the inclusion and exclusion were far too restrictive. I went out, visited many of the sites, and then pulled together a list of the key problem ones. And we were able to make an amendment which got the study moving much faster. So the key thing is, if you're seeing enrollment criteria being too restrictive, as Betsy was saying, give feedback to the site as quickly as possible. Next thing, sometimes the PI, go back, Ari. Next reason, either the PI and the study coordinator are not engaged or not qualified. The latter, thank goodness, is not very common. I had one study I was doing where the study coordinator had just come from a background as a detective, no scientific background. That study never enrolled at all. The study coordinator was clearly not qualified. The ideal, if you have somebody who's not qualified working on a team, make a change there. Far more common, of course, is that either one or both of the principal investigator or study coordinator is not engaged. I think we all know, right? You've heard the expression, what gets managed gets done. If you don't truly focus on what's going on with your trial, things will not happen. And conversely, if you are really focused on what's happening, things will happen. So if we think about why things slow down within the practice, the first thing, of course, is too few patients. There's often not much you can do about it. If you're a small practice, you've really got to be vigilant about trying to find patients. The best thing to do if you have too few patients is to try go outside the practice, which is what we'll talk about next. Second thing, of course, is competing trials. There are many sites that take on competing trials looking for the same population. If you're in a circumstance where you've got that happening, you have to be fair, right? So allocate probably 50-50 to one trial and the other one. can tell you that from a sponsor standpoint, they don't like it when they find that one protocol, the competing protocol, is getting all the patients. So be careful what you take on. And then thirdly, Betsy went into this in quite some detail, what I call suboptimal systems. It keeps me busy for a lot of the time. The first part of that issue is we'll come to a site and they'll tell me with great excitement they have 10 or 15 or 20 oncologists or gastroenterologists who are available within the practice to provide patients. The problem is it's only one or two who really know about the protocol. All the rest either don't care about research, barely know about the protocol, and then the question is, how do you overcome that? And I think one of the ideas that Betsy mentioned, which we found to be very effective, is a lunch and learn. Either the principal investigator, sometimes the medical science liaison, or somebody like me can come in and discuss the protocol over lunch. As you know, lunch or dinner, people sit down and you have their focused attention maybe for 20 minutes. It's a great way to try help. I'll talk in some of the best practices how we can do better in this area as well. What makes it even more difficult is when you go into practice and they tell you that they've got 3 different satellites in the city. How do you get the word out to them about the protocol? And then the same principles can apply, which I'll talk about in best practices. Now, going outside the practice, referrals directly from other competing practices can be really challenging, as Betsy was alluding to, but there are other ways to get referrals. And then the thing that I find consistently, and I'm sure for those of you who are sites know this well, frequently sites have neither the resources, the time, or the skills to market direct to patients. And there are 2 ways around that. Either the study coordinator goes to some seminars and tries to learn some of these skills. Another thing that might be useful, and I've seen this at some of the sites that I work with, they find a vendor who's really experienced in technology and will help build out their website, develop a Google AdWords strategy, develop a Facebook strategy for the site that can really pay back in spades. Next slide. So let's now get into the habits of highly effective sites. Number 1, the first one is by far the most powerful I have found, no matter what therapeutic area you're talking about. And that's to have the study coordinator check the incoming patient's schedule 1 to 2 days ahead of time. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing a gastric cancer trial, end-stage renal disease. If you're looking for a specific type of patient, check the schedule 1 or 2 days before. And then just as important, check the notes of the patient after the visit. So for example, let's say you're doing a ulcerative colitis trial. You know that a patient with ulcerative colitis has just come in that day. Previously, they may have been just fine. When you look at the notes, you may find that they're doing worse, and that's a perfect study patient. You'll only find that out after looking at the patient notes after the visit. So really important. This is an extremely powerful strategy. Next slide. This is really important for sites that have several studies, and most sites do. Develop a one-pager. Sometimes it's in a booklet form. I've seen it in a binder where any of the practitioners in the practice can just go to this binder if they think a patient could be eligible for a protocol and see the key outline. Betsy showed you some actual examples where you can put sort of the basics of a study. I think even better, especially if you've got a huge number of trials. Just to give an example, I was working with an oncology site some years ago where they had over 100 trials going on in a general oncology practice. They had developed a highly searchable database. So for example, you could input highly differentiated lymphoma into the database, and any trial for highly differentiated lymphoma would come up. You would then click on any of the trials they had, and you would get a one-pager describing that study. Really powerful. It does require some programming, of course. Next slide. So habit number 3, almost all practices have regular meetings, partner meetings, practice meetings, where they discuss issues related to the practice, and frequently will include studies. For oncology, it's quite regular or routine to have what they call tumor boards, either every week, every 2 weeks, every month, where they discuss patient management And that's the perfect place for the PI and or the study coordinator in attendance to be discussing protocols, either specific patients who they can talk about, or for studies in general, there should be just a little, perhaps 5-minute segment where any studies that are not enrolling can be discussed with the practitioners who come to that meeting. Habit number 4, next slide. This is the one that I think is completely underutilized by sites. It just blows me away that most sites are not doing this. And that's to communicate with your database regularly. Email is the obvious one, right? It's free. You can contact hundreds, even thousands of patients with just a very brief amount of time. The key thing, of course, if you're going to do email is you do need to have patient permissions, right? When a patient gives you an email, they must give you permission to email them with information. The question is, how frequently should you do it? And an expert that I've spoken to, I went to a seminar, somebody was discussing this particular strategy. He said the ideal is every day. Now, I know most sites are not going to do this every day. At least every week would be better. At worst, every month. And it could be a newsletter. If you're an oncology practice, you could be discussing things like wellness, meditation, natural therapies. And of course, it's a great opportunity to mention any trials that you've got going on. Now, snail mail, the good old-fashioned mail that we get in our mailbox from the US mail service, probably works better today than it ever did because we get much less junk mail. So patients are more likely to open up a letter that you send them about trials that you have going on. I was doing a study in ulcerative colitis some time back, and we had a site that sent a letter with a refrigerator magnet included, which says something along the lines, if your ulcerative colitis is not responding to your medication, please call me at this number. So it was from their practice. The study coordinator included their phone number on this refrigerator magnet. The letter may have been tossed in the garbage, but the refrigerator magnet hopefully was put on the refrigerator, and patients see it, of course, whenever they go to the fridge. So snail mail, especially bulky snail mail with a little enclosure, a pen, a refrigerator magnet, makes it much more likely to be opened. Okay, next one, habit number 5. So as we were talking about earlier on, when I was telling you the story of my wife with end-stage kidney disease, every site should have a web and a social media strategy, a Facebook page. And the key thing is any lead that you get from that strategy, you must follow up within 24 hours. Faster is better. As soon as you get to 48, 72, 96, 1 week, patients have completely forgotten, right? So they see an ad, they click through it. When you call them 2 weeks later, 1 month later, they have no recall what you're talking about. They won't answer the phone. The faster you get on it, the better. Next slide. Habit number 6, it's all about relationships. I was working with a site some years back. It was an individual practitioner, just one physician. He had 4 study coordinators. That's how busy he was in clinical research. He was, I think, our 3rd highest enroller in the United States. And I tried to understand, how were they doing it? How was one practitioner getting so many patients? And a large part of it was because of relationships. Every time a patient came in with a certain disease they were looking for, the study coordinator would meet with that patient, even if the patient wasn't ready for the trial, give the business card and say, if ever you're not feeling well with your disease, call me. So that was step number 1. Step number 2, all patients were given the study coordinator phone number. So regardless of what was going on, if the patient had an adverse event on the trial, if the patient wasn't feeling well while on trial, they didn't go through the receptionist, they called the study coordinator direct. There was always somebody on call, and it was totally a feeling of being a valued participant and a welcome guest, almost like in a hotel. There was a separate section for patients who were in a trial, separate from the normal reception area. Patients felt like they were really highly valued. And what they described to me was when a patient came off a trial at their site, the trial was done, patients would try to get into another trial. That's how good they were treated. So it's all about relationships and making patients feel special. And then last slide, habit number 7. Betsy talked about this in details. The support groups, advocacy groups, for so many diseases, they are an incredible resource. And I would say that resource support groups typically fall into doing two main things. Number one, education. They may have educational evenings where patients can come in. It's a great opportunity for a physician or PI within a practice to go speak and give some educational support to patients. And of course, it's a great way then for patients to see, wow, I really like this person. I would like that person to be my physician. And then secondly, they often have fundraising, which may include a walk. It may include a weekend in a water park. They allow you to have a table or a booth where you can hand out brochures about your practice, about particular studies. Fantastic way, as Betsy was saying, to generate more patients for the practice. Next slide. So if any of you have questions or you want to get a copy of my slides, there's my email, pharmaphysician@gmail.com. It'll be my pleasure to answer your questions at any point in time. Of course, we do have a question and answer session coming up. And that is it. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
All right, everyone, if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A section to go ahead and ask any questions. So maybe one question I do have for you, Theo, is in terms of patient recruitment material, because I know that's a big point that Betsy spoke on. What have you seen in terms of material to be effective? Have you seen the print ads, videos? What have you seen to be more effective in that area?
You know, it really works differently with different therapeutic areas and different sites. The good old-fashioned patient brochure works extremely well, where you can give an overview. I was doing a trial some time back where there was an invasive procedure. The patient had their heart catheterized for the study. And we had a brochure where we described in detail what the patient would go through and why it was worthwhile for the patient to do that. Extremely effective. It overcame any fear the patient may have had. So a really well-written patient brochure can be extremely effective, especially with cartoons, pictorial. Having said all that, video works really well today. So if you're thinking, for example, about a Facebook ad, having a video describing the trial, and what works far better than a general video is to have the study physician talk, making it personalized. Hi, I'm Dr. Jones. I've got this trial going on right now where we're looking for patients with such and such. We're looking for patients who have the following criteria. If we would be interested, call the number below or click through to the link on the link below. Anything that's personalized in video works much better than a generalized message. So it really depends on the protocol, but I think the more you personalize, the better. Print works well, video works extremely well as well.
Great. Those are amazing suggestions. And I know relationships is one key facet that you stressed. Outside of that, how do you think physicians and site coordinators could really scale that and offer scalable relationship building techniques? Is there anything you might suggest, like a health fair or kind of along those lines?
So when there's a health fair, that can be a really good opportunity. It really depends on the disease. I've heard different things about different diseases, but it's always worth a try. So if there's a health fair, a college fair, go along, take out a booth or a table, take some brochures with you, take as much practice information as you can with you, and give it a try. Anything that you can do, of course, to bring attention, like a sort of a large flyer, a large banner, just explaining what you do, rather than just a table where people have to come and ask you what you do, might improve the people who come by. The old story of offering some candy. If you can ahead of time, sometimes the fair will allow you to be in their brochure or the program listing of all the different tables or booths that are out there. If you can mention something like, come by and put in your business card for a free drawing, anything you can do to increase the traffic coming by would be helpful. So what we're coming down to, of course, is it's all marketing. The more you as a practice can enhance your marketing skills, the better you're going to do.
Okay, great. Here's a question for both you and Betsy. As there's a large focus on oncology and rare orphan conditions today, sites have to really be conscious of the full patient journey as part of the recruitment efforts. So what that means is ensuring that the patients understand the support they will receive through the study to help them make them more comfortable and with consenting coming on board. What are various things they can do to help a patient during their whole journey? What are other ideas you could provide on that aspect to make it easier while they're in the study or even before the study, before they consent to feel comfortable? Thea, if you'd like to maybe talk on that point, and then Betsy, if you want to follow up with that.
So in general, the more available the PI
or Betsy, if you'd like to take point on that.
Sure.
The more available the PI is, the better the chances are of convincing a patient. So one of the things, of course, to be challenged with today when we do clinical trials is when the patient reads the informed consent, it sounds terrifying, right? And then one of the things you can point out to the patient is, just show them the package insert for the standard therapy. It's probably as frightening, if not more frightening. So we need to give patients some perspective on why they should even participate in the trial. And what I've seen is that empathetic, focused, and engaged PIs can make a huge difference. PIs that think they can just delegate that to the study coordinator are often mistaken. Having said all that, a study coordinator who is also empathetic and really involved should supplement what the PI says about a protocol and explain to the patient why they should come into the protocol. So that's part one, really being involved in explaining to the patient why the patient should consider the trial. Now, of course, once they're on the trial, I think the basic principles apply to what I was saying before. It's being totally available to the patient, giving them your direct phone number, always somebody on call. When it comes to oncology, things happen in the middle of the night. Having a study coordinator and or PI available makes a huge difference. Telling the patient right up front, I will be here for you. Here's my business card. Here's my phone number. Contact me directly any time of the day. Betsy, you want to add something?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with all that Theo said. And again, encourage you to explore that and get an idea of what that patient journey really looks like. We also try to create those tools for the patient to simplify that informed consent process. Sometimes a flip chart, or even now we're going to more video, where you can explain what is involved, especially like you said with these oncology and rare disease indications. The consents are getting more and more complicated for these patients to understand, and they're, especially for oncology, they're already at a point where they're, faced with some difficult decisions. So any way that we can support here at MedPace, we try to enable, start from the beginning with our planning as far as resources for the sites to make sure that they are successful, and that includes that full patient journey that you talked about.
Great. Thank you. And then in terms of, post-consent, what ideas would you guys have in helping them feel more comfortable while they're in the trial and being part of the trial as well? Betsy, if you'd like to take this one first, and then Theo, if you'd like to answer second.
Sure. So again, I think it goes back to what Theo was saying with just really engaging with your patients and really getting to know your patients at the site level. I think that it's more than just, coming and checking a box. I mean, when we are successful, and even something that we did at the site to really show our appreciation was we created a wall of fame, we called it, where we actually got photos of participants that were continued participants, good study patients in studies, and got their permission to hang their picture on the wall. We ended up with a whole hallway full of, and it really made the patient feel special and kind of promoting that, you're grateful for their participation and that they really truly are a medical hero. And Syscript is a good group that has all of these, free materials available to promote that medical hero theme. But again, that's kind of what worked for our site.
Let me just add something to what I was saying. I have one site that told me recently that what they do is all patients who are on the trial, every month, the patient gets a call just to see how they're doing. And they know it's coming. I mean, this is like regular. And the patient knows that besides, of course, being available to them when they call, the site is also interested just to see how they're doing. Just, how are you? And then related to that, I think this is a great recruitment strategy. How about calling, let's say you've got a database of 150 patients, even 200. Call 10 patients every day who are not in a trial yet, but they're in the database. This is, for example, a chronic disease, and say, I'm the study coordinator. Just wanted to know want you to remind you that we do have these trials going on. If you're not feeling well, if you think that you're not responding to your current medication, just give me a call. So it's proactively just contacting patients who are already in your database to say, hi, I'm here. We've got trials going on. If ever you're not feeling good and you think you could be perhaps failing your existing therapy, give me a call.
Great. Betsy, do you have a point you'd to add to that?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say another. In building on that, one thing we also did was monthly we would send out birthday emails to all the patients in our database that had birthdays that month, and it would again kind of they just really appreciated that thoughtfulness, and we would get calls back and be able to talk about studies that they may be interested in at that time.
Were there any tools that you would recommend using to do that? Did you feel like one CTMS system did it better than others?
We used a CTMS called Clinical Conductor at our site, and it actually was very simple. We could just get a list of, we had over 30,000 patients in our database, but it would just pop out a list with email addresses of people who had a birthday that month.
Great. And then a question for myself, actually. As you're doing the patient hero stories and having the pictures on the wall, what kind of forms did you have them sign, and did you ever have them write out kind of a story, actually, too, of their patient journey or why they're a patient hero? So a two-part question.
Okay, so sure. So yes, we did have it was just a photo release form that our legal department just printed out. It was just a permission to display their photo, take it and display it. And then we did encourage people to share their journeys, and we actually, part of every year we produced a TV ad that would just run intermittently, but we actually included, I think we had quotes from 5 patients that agreed to be in the TV commercial, and they edited it in bits and blurbs of their particular reasons why they were in a clinical trial and why they would encourage other people to be in a clinical trial. So that was very helpful as well.
Great. I believe that is most of the questions that we have. Everyone, there is a handout section, so if you do want to download any of the documents that we referred to, such as the health fairs or automating your health fairs or the pre-screening, you have all those documents available. We will be sending a recorded copy of this video to everyone as well, so that way you have it to share with your team and anyone else you'd like to share with. Betsy or Theo, if you have any other questions or points you'd like to address before we end the webinar?
Oh yeah, just one point I wanted to add here. I'm just going to use an extreme example. I was at a site recently where the research group was on the ground floor and the clinical practice was on the first floor, and never the two shall meet. There was barely interaction between them. And here's the point. Clinical research, if you're going to do it, has to be integrated completely into clinical practice. It has to be part of the way you think, the way you live, the way you run the practice. Clinical research is not just a sideline, sort of on the side if we can have time to get to it. It has to be a way of thinking if you're going to take it seriously.
Good point. It definitely has to be well integrated. And, I think at the least they have to schedule meetings that they can meet at least weekly, if not bi-weekly. So I guess that does end it for all the questions we've had. Betsy, are there any other points you'd like to add before we end the webinar? So I think she might have had a few issues.
Sorry,
Betsy?
I actually
I
got.
know.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I actually
Okay.
got kicked out of my room, so I'm sorry. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, well, Betsy and Theo, I do want to thank you for presenting your insights in the industry and sharing all your experience. So I speak on behalf of all attendees. Thank you so much. And everyone that attended, we do appreciate you attending as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. And until next time, good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.